Hello, everyone. Welcome to our program. I'm Dean Falk, and I'm Managing Partner, San Francisco for DLA Piper, and Chair of Global Strategy at the Halifax International Security Forum. I'd like to very warmly welcome you to our program. We're on Zoom, we're on YouTube, we are really multimedia. And as we were doing the countdown, I was seeing comments from South Africa, Caribbean, Philippines, Canada, Madagascar, India, Turkey, and Sri Lanka. So we're so grateful that you would take the time to join us this morning, or whether it's your morning or your afternoon or your evening. Our event today is commemorating the United Nations 75th anniversary and the efforts by Lions Club International to help draft the United Nations Charter here in San Francisco. Our theme today is redefining peace. And after all, the UN Charter is perhaps the document, or the first document, to create a truly global organization whose core mission is to promote peace. But how should we think about that today, 75 years on, in our current context? How should we think about peace, and what role should the United Nations and multilateral organizations play in tackling our most pressing problems? And what role can nonprofits like Lions Club International play, or subnational actors like the state of California? These are some of the themes that we will tackle today, and we look forward to your participation. Today's program is hosted by Lions Club International, Multiple District 4, which is here in California, District 4C4, and thank you so much for hosting the event. We're very grateful. Mr. Paul Klimos, our moderator, will be leading the discussion. He is, of course, the chairperson of LCI's UN 75. He is a distinguished lawyer and civic leader. Prior to his work as a leading corporate lawyer here in the Bay Area, he held roles at the Federal Reserve Bank in New York and the Central Bank of Lebanon. Paul is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Agile Governance. We have with us as well 3 distinguished panelists. I'm going to leave it to Paul to do the more fulsome introductions, but simply to identify them, we have Brandel, who is the past international president of Lions Club International and representative to the United Nations. She's a leading diplomat and civil servant within the United Nations. We also have Ambassador Amal Mudallali, who is the Vice President of the UN General Assembly and permanent representative of Lebanon to the United Nations. She is a distinguished leader in nonprofit and diplomacy. And we have Ambassador Eleni Kunalakis, who is our Lieutenant Governor in California. I can tell you that Ambassador Kunalakis is one of our most forward-thinking and international-minded public servants here. She has served as ambassador to Hungary and chaired the International Trade Council here in California. So we're delighted to have her as well. Before we kick off our discussion, we have 2 very short videos to show you. One is welcoming remarks from the current LCI president, who is Dr. Jung Choi. And we also have a special treat, which is historical footage from 1945 and the historical relationship between LCI and the UN. This will give us a real sense of the role that LCI played in the drafting of the UN Charter. So without further ado, let's roll the tapes and enjoy the program.
Dear Lions and Leos, ours is one of the most unique organizations on earth and one of the most important in ordinary times and in times of great need. We are called upon to serve by our communities and by the world. That's because we bring kindness to those we serve. And our incredible diversity helps us serve in so many ways and in so many places. We are 1.4 million men and women in more than 48,000 clubs. We don't just serve the world, we represent it. As much as we are different, we are the same. We are lions. Our service brings us together. There is no limit to what we can achieve when we work together. We can serve our local causes and our global causes. We can unite people in new ways with specialty clubs. We can support our global foundation, LCIF, to empower the service of Lions now and for generations to come. We can find new ways to safely serve our communities. It takes a great organization like ours to take on big challenges. It takes great clubs like yours. It takes you, the most incredible volunteers in the world. Your unique contributions and your kindness are needed now more than ever before. Together, we can strengthen our communities. Together, we can change lives. And together, we can change the world when we are united in kindness and diversity. Thank you for your incredible service.
To San Francisco came 1,400 representatives from 46 nations.
In 1945, Lions leaders were among representatives who met to help establish the non-governmental organization section of the United Nations. And they threw their full support behind the new organization, calling upon clubs to support it as well. Lions Clubs International underscored its commitment to a certain and lasting peace for the world in 1946, when International President Pierce delivered greetings to the Paris Peace Conference, which officially marked the end of World War II.
When they left, I said, there goes our Lions international statesman working for world peace.
The first Secretary General of the United Nations, Trygve Lie, thanked Lions for their good wishes for the successful outcome for the whole work of the United Nations. In 1947, the United Nations granted Lions consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council. In 1988, Lions created the International Peace Poster Contest. Mustafa Tawukji, who grew up in war-torn Beirut, Lebanon, was the first contest winner. Since 1988, millions of children worldwide have participated. The International Grand Prize winner is honored at Lions Day with the United Nations.
That's really helped me to develop a more worldly view.
Since 2011, students who are blind and visually impaired have also had a chance to express their thoughts on peace through the Lions International Essay Contest.
For me, peace feels like freedom from ignorance or conflicts such as war.
Lions and the United Nations continue to work together to improve lives and further peace around the world. Lions support the UN Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals to combat poverty, hunger, disease, environmental crises, and more. As citizens of the world, Lions respond to one need, one community, one life at a time. In the years, decades, and centuries ahead, Lions will continue to unite in friendship and serve as community and world leaders to sow seeds of peace at home and around the world.
Peace.
Shanti.
Dean, thank you very much for your words. Fellow Lions, dear friends, on behalf of Multiple District 4 and District 4C4, thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the United Nations 75th anniversary and commemorate LCI's efforts in drafting the UN Charter. This anniversary is an opportunity for us to reflect on the true meaning of peace and to reaffirm the values that brought our nations together 75 years ago. Peace goes beyond the absence of cannons. My vision of peace encompasses important issues such as climate change, pandemics, and cyber warfare. Technology has taken us to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. But still, we face devastating wildfires, deadly pandemics, and violent armed conflict. The map behind me is my home country, Lebanon. Lebanon carries a universal message of peace. My country gave the world Khalil Gibran's wisdom and Dr. Charles Malik, who played a key role in drafting and adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Oh, I just noticed that the video just started. This is the map I was pointing to. Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, Ambassador Mudallali, and Lion Al, thank you for being part of today's conversation. It is a true pleasure and honor to have you on this panel. Our audience, this session will run for about an hour and will be followed by a 15-minute dynamic Q&A session, and we really look forward to your participation. Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis, good morning. As Dean mentioned, you are not only our Lieutenant Governor here in California, but you are one of the youngest and most successful former US ambassadors. The latest post was to Hungary. And thank you again for joining us today. 75 years after hosting the SF conference, California is home to the biggest tech companies our generation has ever known. It has evolved to become a gateway to both the future and the world. If California was a country, it would rank as the world's maybe 5th global largest economy, and therefore it can indeed play a huge role in global affairs. The question to you is, with the understanding that US foreign policy is handled at the federal level, could you please tell us about California's efforts and initiatives to promote, create, and maintain peace?
Well, first of all, Paul, I want to thank you so much for inviting me here today, as well as thank my friend Dean Falk and fellow San Franciscan for including me, and the Lions Club International, which had such an important foundational role in the development of the United Nations Treaty. And Paul, I think that there was a request that maybe I say a few words about the history of why San Francisco was chosen and what actually happened there, because it really is quite interesting. You know, it was on the heels of the end of the Second World War. Eleanor Roosevelt, of course, was a driving force behind the United Nations, and there had been early developments of concepts and frameworks for a treaty, and the framework that came out of Dumbarton Oaks was taken to San Francisco. It was 1945 in April. It was a 2-month conference called the San Francisco Conference. I love the idea of coming to San Francisco for a 2-month conference. So especially with our hotels being battered, to keep that in mind. But delegates came from around the world. There were 50 countries that were represented, and they worked very hard through committees. And during that San Francisco conference, they essentially came up with all of the elements of the charter. And at the end of the conference, on June 26th, I think was the date. Yes, June 26th. They opened it for signatories. And then at that point, in the green room in San Francisco at the War Memorial, which I'm very proud to have served as a trustee on for many years, the countries began to ratify and sign the accord. One of the things that I learned as I was studying this, I didn't quite realize, is that the reason why San Francisco was chosen is because it is equidistant from Asia and Europe and from Latin America. So it was seen as sort of this central location of the world. But what was interesting is that Franklin Roosevelt liked it because the battle for the Pacific in the Second World War had been so hard fought. And it was a way to really establish that California, and a critically important part of the United States, is right here on the Pacific Rim. And, for so long, the East Coast had been this central, the whole country is oriented around Washington and New York and the East Coast. And this was a really important marker to recognize that California is a critical Pacific Rim location. And so I just wanted to also remind everyone of this great quote from then Governor of California, Earl Warren. At the signing, he said, "We recognize that our future is linked with a world future in which the term good neighbor has become a global consideration." And I know Lions Club members will appreciate that language, but it is as true today, maybe even more true today, than it was at the time that the governor said it. So I am delighted to be on this panel, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more, maybe just very, very briefly as we go through this panel. But there are basically three areas where California is working at the subnational level today and into the future that are really our priorities. We're very, very committed to combating climate change. We have stayed in the Paris Accords. We can talk about that a little bit more later. Secondly, trade is very important to us. As you mentioned, Paul, California, if it were a country, would be the 5th largest economy in the world. Our economy is roughly the size of the United Kingdom. It is this large and vibrant and important because of international trade. And then finally, immigration. And of course, the federal government sets immigration policy, but we feel it is incumbent upon us to talk about this issue because California is 27% foreign born. 27% of Californians, like you, Paul, were born outside of the United States. And this is our strength and something we feel we need to stand on our platform and talk about. So I look forward to this discussion. I think we will be able to explore this and many other parts of the theme today.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor. And taking the point of diversity, indeed, it is a very, very powerful element of what constitutes California. And I'll take it to Ambassador Mudallali, whose diverse experience as well will be able to direct our next question. So Ambassador Mudallali, thank you as well for joining us. You're not only the permanent representative of my home country, Lebanon, to the United Nations, but also the current Vice President of the United Nations General Assembly. But also, and not for those who do not know that, your experience as a renowned journalist and reporter will definitely bring a unique perspective to not only our conversation, but also to diplomatic thought leadership and endeavors. In your view, what role can youth and technology play in rejuvenating and democratizing diplomacy?
Thank you very much, Paul. I would like to start by thanking you personally for this initiative and for inviting me. And also would like to thank the Lions Club International and the multiple districts 4 of California and the District 4C4 for hosting this event. I also would like to thank Dean Falk for the introduction that he made, and also the Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis, the Lieutenant Governor of California, and for this introduction about why San Francisco, because it's so important. I also would like to thank Mr. Brandel, the former international president of the Lions Club. before I talk about the technology, I want to tell you how important it is for me today to be in this panel, because we were planning last fall how we're going to be in San Francisco during the anniversary of the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, and we were even making plans and getting ready to go. So being there today, it's so important for me, and it's historically it's very heartwarming, because Lebanon was there in San Francisco in 1945. A small country in the Mediterranean was there, played a very important role in the proceedings of the conference, and signed the Charter of the United Nations. So I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to be here at this time. Before I start, also, I would like to talk about the statement that the governor of California said then, and I appreciate that the ambassador mentioned it, but there's another part of the statement. He recognized the global character of the world that we live in, but he also said that we have learned that understanding of one another's problems is the greatest assurance of peace. So understanding is a very, very important element of peace. And today we are facing such recognition, and we are facing huge challenges in the world because of the tensions that are going on, because of the challenges that multilateralism is facing. So it's really important for us to recognize that before start talking about technology as one of the important elements. Technology has democratized our world in ways that nobody ever imagined when we're talking about the effect of technology. So it's so important for us today to realize how that most of the advances that United Nations and the world has made over the last 75 years, we owe a lot of them, a majority of them, to the advancement in technology that made the interconnection possible, that connected the world together, that made us closer to each other, made us very able to talk to each other and to be cooperating with each other. Otherwise, things would have been so different. Communications, the communication revolution that may create a new world, an interconnected world. So my problems are somebody's problem in China or the Middle East or Latin America. So we all are connected, and the world is more connected than ever. So that's the technology that really transformed our world. And thank you, San Francisco and California, because you are the capital of technology, and you are leading in every single way. And you are so essential for progress in the world. That's why you are so essential for the relationship with the United Nations and the future of the United Nations. But, I don't want to go too long about this, but we also are facing, especially after the pandemic, another pandemic of misinformation and use of technology, especially social media and all the platforms, the new platforms, to spread misinformation, fake news, and information that really kills. And words kill if you don't use them well. That's why the United Nations this week had a very important campaign to pause and think before you post. So it's very important that social media and technology is used for peace, is used to enhance understanding and not create more tension in the world and create more conflict and be a conduit for separating us and not bringing us together. So technology is very, very important for the future. And if you want to talk more about, when we talk about how the United Nations benefit from partnerships, it's so important for the future of the UN and the world to have technology team up with the United Nations, with all the forces that are working, with civil societies, working for change, for positive change in the world.
Absolutely, Your Excellency. And this is a topic we will cover later in the conversation today, and dig deeper into this multilateralism and the kind of cooperation that can happen between the UN and NGOs and technology. And we will also look into the importance of all the advancements that are coming up on the scientific side, and namely California and Silicon Valley. Coming to what you just mentioned about misinformation and how youth can misuse technology, I think it's a great opportunity for me to introduce past international president Lionel Brandel. And can we see Lionel? Lionel, you served at LCI's international president at the same year, to my recollection, as I led Laos in Beirut. And I still very much remember how youth empowerment and engagement were key drivers to your leadership and the success of your year as a president. My first question to you would be, what role can education play in empowering youth and shaping a more peaceful, equitable, and sustainable future?
Well, hello from New York, Paul, Governor and Excellency and other Lions that are on this. Actually, it's turned out to be a worldwide conference right now, video conference. And Paul, this is a long way from a subway ride in New York some years ago when you were just coming from Lebanon. And you introduced yourself to me, and I referred you to the Financial District Lions Club, and you told me what some of your plans were and your thoughts were, and you've come a long way since then, and I want to congratulate you. Before I answer your question, if I may, Paul, I'd just like to make a bit of an opening statement. It feels like a presidential debate, and it's not a debate, it's a discussion. But many of you know me as Al Brandel, past international president of Lions Club International. But you also know that I am the Lions appointed representative to the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations and Department of Global Affairs. As part of this appointment, I serve as a chairperson for the annual Lions Day at the United Nations event. Only two other past international presidents had the pleasure to serve in this same role, past President Bob Upplinger and past President Joe Robleski. The relationship between Lions Club International and the United Nations began 75 years ago in 1945 when we were invited to assist in drafting the UN Charter. 2 years later in 1947, and I wasn't there at that time, by the way, the United Nations granted Lion consultative status to the United Nations Economic and Social Council in recognition of the importance of Lions Club International to its mission. For generations, Lions and the United Nations have shared many common goals and worked together to further peace and prosperity. We have a rich history with the agencies of the World Health Organization, United Nations Organization on Drugs and Crime, and UNICEF. LCIF, our foundation, more than 30 years of partnership with the WHO is now centered on prevention and control of diabetes and vision loss and elimination of avoidable childhood blindness. Our work with UNICEF has led to many specialty clubs in the area of advocacy. And lastly, Lions Club International Foundation with UNODC and Lions Quest continues to change the lives of youths around the world. And Paul, if I may for a second, I'd just like to share with you something. When my first visits at the United Nations with Bob Upplinger, and it opened my eyes to what we're all about and international understanding, because without international understanding, you can't have peace. And that's why we're not a political organization that makes us so effective. And then I'll get to your question, if that's okay. Bob Upplinger and Joe Robleski took me to Bill Richardson's apartment at the Waldorf Astoria, where he lived at the time. He was the ambassador to the United Nations, the United States. And at that time, there was something going on in the world that a major power and the United States were butting heads over. And Ambassador Richardson invited us and a couple of other ambassadors to his home to discuss Lions and to introduce us to those ambassadors. Well, that particular country at the time was late in arriving, which was usually the norm. And Bill Richardson said to us, "I wish I could learn to work with this government the way Lions had." And what he meant was that it's a country that we are one of the only organizations, NGOs, that's allowed to have membership in that particular country. And I said, wow, Bill Richardson is acknowledging that we're doing something that he can't do. And it really opened my eyes. And Paul, I have some other things later on that if we have the time, because we talk about internationalism, we talk about countries, but sometimes how does it relate to the Lions Club locally? How does it relate to what they do in the Portuguese club in Long Island, New York, the largest club there? How does it relate to things that are going on in Kenya? And I'd like to share some of those stories a little bit later on, because I know you have a schedule. But now that I've rambled on a little bit here, your question was, how can we ramp the educational system to prepare youth for not only the future work, but also for more peaceful future? Is that correct?
We were focusing, of course, we were focusing on the importance that education will definitely play in empowering youth as well and shaping that future. And part of education, of course, you focus on the future of work and the skills that are needed, not only on that professional side, but also, as you mentioned earlier, on the side of culture and mutual understanding among the peoples of the world. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Paul, and I think most of the Lions here do know, and now the ambassador will know and the governor will know, the Lions Quest is this question's right in our wheelhouse. Lions Quest, which is an unbelievable program that we've had for about 30 years, where we train teachers to help students make good life skills decisions and social and emotional learning. And some years ago that we partnered up with UNODC, United Nations Organizations on Drugs and Crime. Our representative to UNODC in New York, Anthony Paradiso, made this connection for us there. And since then, UNODC has adopted our particular program, which I don't think they've adopted any other programs other than ours. And that in 2014, that's when we signed our agreement with UNODC. And since then, we've trained over 8,000 students, 500 educators have been trained, and UNODC has sponsored us into 8 countries that we probably would not be in today, and 185 schools. So if we can help students make good life skills decisions and social and emotional learning, all boats float at that particular time, that everything else will, the children's, the students' lives will change just by making good life skills decisions. And we're pretty proud of that particular relationship with the UNODC, and it continues every year that we're increasing our exposure with UNODC, not only to mention what we're doing without UNODC with Lions Quest around the world. Like I said before, this one's right in our wheelhouse, Paul, and it's one of our 2 shining programs along with World Health Organization, which maybe we'll talk about later. But that's how it works, Paul.
Thank you very much, Lionel. And what can I say? I was part of the Lions Youth Exchange Program for many, many years in my childhood. And I still really remember the importance of both aspects of the program as you not only join youth from 30 to 35 countries in a 2 to 3 weeks camp, but you also live for 2 or 3 weeks with a local family. You speak their language, you dress the way they dress, you learn their jokes, you learn what makes them sad, you learn what makes them interested. And this is how you really learn about other cultures instead of only going to a hotel or just doing what a tourist guide would tell you to do. Well, and that played an element in the global conversation, and that also mentions refers us to the diversity element that Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis mentioned, and the importance of actually sitting all together from the lens of being kind of complementary in a perspective of richness, right? You're not only different, and then you're also complementary. You make the world different. And from that, thank you, Lionel. And I'd love to also go back to Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis, who is a very, very strong advocate for equity, innovation, and sustainable development. And we can sense that in your energy as well as you began with your opening statement. We all know that the role California is playing right now. And as mentioned earlier in my opening statement, California has become a gateway to the future and the world. To the world based on its diversity, and to the future because of its innovation. Digging deeper into the positive impact, in your view, how can California leverage positive social impact of all its constituents and facilitate their cooperation with the UN and NGOs such as LCI?
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for that recognition. We are determined to make sure that California's values and our voice on the world stage is heard. We feel an obligation, particularly at a time, and not to get political here, but where some of what is coming out of Washington, D.C. is really divergent with what we consider to be not just California values, but fundamental American values, working together with our allies, the allies who signed the United Nations in San Francisco so many years ago, working toward human rights, recognizing that immigration has been our strength, recognizing that having an infrastructure of fair trade is something that is good for everyone. Also recognizing, of course, that labor standards and environmental standards are important. So we run programs constantly with our partners all around the world, whether it's our close cooperation and relationship with Mexico, our most important foreign partner. We have a border with Mexico and our cooperation is very extensive. Or the kinds of programs that we have with our sister provinces in China around bringing them to California to understand how we've managed to deal with air pollution and air quality and water quality and food safety. And we open our doors to bring representatives of other countries here to see the innovative ways that we have met so many of these challenges. We want to share our best practices with the world, and we are set up to be able to do it. So Governor Newsom has redoubled his effort in making sure that we have that red carpet out, whether it's for foreign direct investment and more a stronger trade relationship with our partners, or whether it's to be able to bring representatives of countries here to understand our cap and trade program, which is helping us drive forward to meet our 2045 goals of being carbon neutral in our state. So it starts with intention. It's followed up with robust programs, and underpinning all of this is our system of values that we adhere to in this state very strongly. And I will also maybe just mention the strength of the economy really helps. We have 53 of the Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here in California. It also helps, as I mentioned before, that we're 27% foreign born, because I've been watching the chat. It's really remarkable. There are folks here representing Lions Clubs in Barbados, Paraguay, Armenia. You know, we have communities here who have family all around the world, and those kinds of connections and interpersonal connections also help us to make sure that our cooperation is robust and fruitful.
Thank you very much. Amen to that. And indeed, California is home to the world's biggest companies and also home to some of the world's brightest brains that are bringing this innovation to the world. And this brings us also to what Ambassador Mudallali mentioned earlier about the importance of partnership, and particularly in the field of technology, and the importance of big tech companies with their global footprint on leveraging the positive social impact that they can have on the world. Perhaps, Ambassador Mudallali, could you please tell us about the UN's most effective partnerships in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and how can the private sector, such as what Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis just mentioned, particularly meaning tech companies and the people of California and people around the world, can help us all achieve those huge goals that we have. Ambassador, you are on mute. Could you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Paul. Actually, you know, I was very, very heartened to see when I first came how important partnerships are for the United Nations. Because, you know, when you're sitting outside the UN, you really don't know how much is happening in terms of partnerships. And partnerships are at the heart of what the United Nations is doing. There's a UN office for partnerships. And SDG 17, for instance, calls for vitalizing the global partnership for the SDGs. So the UN is working with so many, with civil society, with the private sector, with the organizations from around the world to try to help in implementing the SDGs. There's also the SG has a scientific board for advisory scientific board for science issues. He has another one for mediation, for also to help him. There's a partnership with people from around the world who have been in public office and have experience to do this. So partnerships are very, very important for the United Nations to try to work on these issues, but most importantly on the issues of SDGs, because the SDGs are not on track to meet the goal of 2030. So it's so important that the United Nations be helped, and that's where the role of private sector, the role of companies, international companies that can work, for instance, on measuring the SDGs implementation and things like that. So things that the United Nations itself does not have the tools to be able to do. So that's important. And as long as we're talking now in California, I wish there is a way to spread the word and try to encourage people to reach out. And if they have any platforms, any ideas about how to expedite things, how to make things work easier, how to help the United Nations, because you're helping the world, how to help the world to be on track to meet the goals in 2030, how to help the world in peace, because there are companies that working in technology companies that are working on peace building. So the United Nations is all of us, and we need help. That's why it's so important for these partnerships to succeed. And I think it's so important at this time where, as the Secretary General said, we are going through a foundational moment where, because of the pandemic, because of what's happening in the world, we are really at a crossroad. We can either work together and try to partner, all of us, and put all our resources together to try to go on a peaceful way and try to have the United Nations on a stronger path and try to have our work together on a stronger route than to let things fall off the cracks and then conflict will take over. The post-pandemic world will be a more fragmented and more dangerous world. So I don't think the United Nations or anybody can do anything without working together and having these partnerships and utilizing the civil society, utilizing people through the technology, through all the new tools that we have to try to have a better world, try to have a more peaceful world, because so far we have not done a great job.
Agreed. And what better audience can we have we have the government being represented here, we have an international organization being represented, and we have a non-governmental organization such as LCI and the audience around the world. We will definitely get to that as we start the global questions to all the panelists. Right now, we're going to end with the last directed question per panelist, and then move towards more dynamic kind of question where the three of you can start getting more action. And the last question directed to Lion Al, shifting gears maybe a little bit from the last kind of topic here, but going back to your earlier remark, could you please elaborate on the importance of art and culture in promoting, creating, and maintaining peace? I know we do a lot of that in Lions Clubs. And please unmute yourself, Lion Al. Could you please unmute? Thank you.
Arts and culture, that's the question.
There you go.
All right, you knew this one, didn't you? As you know, arts and culture is right again in our wheelhouse, but particularly with the United Nations, because we recognize our youth through their efforts through arts and culture. Lions Peace Poster Contest was established in 1988, as you know, Paul, for children 11, 12, and 13 years around the world, with a chance to express their vision of peace and to inspire a world through art and creativity. And I know, Paul, that you've been to Lions Day at the UN, and some of these children are just unbelievable with their vision of peace, and they put it down on paper, and they come and they receive recognition from us at Lions Day at the UN. But then when they get up to speak, we just never expected that to happen. We just thought that they'd be artists, but to hear them speak about their unbelievable experiences and thoughts about peace in the world just became an unbelievable thing to us. And from that grew the peace poster and peace essay contest provided participating Lions clubs with the opportunity to make connections with their communities, gaining positive public relations through local news media, encouraging peace and promote international understanding, which is a part of our mission of Lions Club International. And we've had, again, about the same age group of children that wrote their feelings. And we give them a topic in the beginning of the year, not a topic, but a particular slant on peace. And these children just, they're so deep. We should never discount our youth today, what they're capable of. And they get to read their peace essay at the Lions Day at the United Nations. And it's one of our key attractions. That's why so many people come to Lions Day at the UN, not to hear me, not to hear the officers of Lions International, but they really want to come and hear the children, because they get something that they just never expect. Never take a child or somebody, they're just taken for granted. They have something to offer, and just listen to them, because we can learn a lot from them, and we do at the United Nations at our event.
Thank you very much, Lionel. Ambassadors, both Kounalakis and Mudallali, I know you both probably love art, but is there any kind of work of art or some kind of element of culture that resonates with you and the term peace? Sorry, that was out of the blue right now.
Well, Paul, it won't surprise you, since I'm Greek American, that ancient Greek art speaks to me in so many ways, particularly from the classical and the Hellenistic period, because what we saw was the evolution of the concept of the human being reflected in that artwork, from very stiff depictions to very lifelike depictions, and the use of the human being in the art on the temples, taking the notion of faith and God and connecting it to the human being. And I think that for me, that will always stand as this critical point in human evolution, where we really did begin to see that as human beings, there is so much that we can do to, well, as President Kennedy once said, on this earth, God's work must truly be our own.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. Ambassador Mudallali, anything on your mind?
Sorry. You know, the first thing that comes to my mind when you talk about that is the knotted gun at the United Nations. It's so haunting, that sculpture. I mean, it really symbolizes the UN now. If you go, and it's all over the world now. You have copies of it all over the world. But when you come to the United Nations from the visitor center, and it just, you know, comes at you, it just reminds you of the message of the nonviolence, of the importance that we have to not all our arms. And it's so so haunting when you think about it all the time. But you know, at the UN, this is not the only the only thing that stands there. When you get into that building, there is an atmosphere of you're entering like a shrine. You know, every single piece from a different country, really, it represents something, and it represents peace. It represents the best that this country has, and the best that this country produced in terms of art, or in terms of you know, culture and everything. So this whole collection of things speaks to this message of peace and this message of nonviolence. And I wish there will be more efforts to present this world, this art to the world, because the UN is full of art, beautiful art. And now for the 75th anniversary, actually, the Secretary General asked a question. You know, they did this big survey around the world, and the Secretary General asked this question: what are your hopes for the future? And many people around the world, they answered with art. Their answer was, they expressed their answer with art. And the United Nations teamed with Google Art, and they did an amazing exhibit about that. So the UN and art are really intertwined. But for me, still that knotted gun is what all the time hits me when I see the building, when I get the new building.
This is very inspirational. Thank you for sharing. Now that we kind of finished the warm-up, I think our vocal cords are ready for a more dynamic session. Lionel, no one's going to be singing. I can see the reaction. But I think the two questions that we'd love to kind of get into right now are both what the world would look like post UN 75, or hopefully post COVID-19. And the second question will be more focused on the purpose of this event. How would we redefine peace moving forward? So starting with the first question, it's an open floor. I want to hear the three of you on that. So what do you see, or how do you see the world coming to post UN 75 and post COVID-19, hopefully very soon?
You're a little sneaky person, Paul. This wasn't one of the questions you gave us, but that's okay. I thought about this recently on another level with the virus that's going on right now, with a lot of things going on in the world. Please excuse me when I say this, and things that are going on in America and other places around the world that there's some things that we just have to try to correct. And everything came at once at one time. And I started thinking about it, and we have an opportunity. After World War II, World War I was over, they built a better world. When my dad came back from World War II, he was the greatest generation ever, and they built the communities. They built the churches, they built the synagogues, they built the youth programs, and they knew how to get things done. And we're going to come out of what we're doing right now, Paul and everybody else here. But do we just want to go back to where we were, or do we want to go back to something better? And I think that while we're trying to conquer what our problems are right now, I don't think we just have to think about solving the virus problem, solving some of the other problems, gender inequality, whatever. I think we can't go back to where we were. We have to come up with a situation where we're better than we were before all of this started. And I think that we, as Lions Club International, other organizations play a part in it, the UN, other countries, I think Lions Club International gives a forum at some of our meetings when our officers go around meeting heads of state where they can start discussing some of these problems. I know when I was an officer of Lions International, I went to one of the largest countries in the world where we were doing a lot of site-related programs, Paul. And I was shocked to hear that head of state said to us, we do not know how to do what you're teaching us to do right now, to put up an infrastructure for cataract surgeries and other surgeries. We want to learn from Lions clubs. And we had the World Health Organization there. And when I heard this, I said, this is just unbelievable that, the head of state of one of the largest governments in the world said this to us. And I think sometimes we just think of ourselves as a Lions Club member in West Hempstead or San Francisco, and we're a small part of a big picture. Well, we're not. If it wasn't for the Lions clubs throughout the world, we wouldn't have Lions Club International. We wouldn't be able to do some of the things that we're doing right now with diabetes. We wouldn't be able to do something we're doing with sight, which we've done so many years. But I do think the bottom line, Paul, is that we have to start thinking of not getting back to where we were. We all have to sit down together and how do we make it better than where we came from originally before these problems started? And we can do it.
Fantastic point. Fantastic point. Where do you think ambassadors, and where do you think that better position than where we were would be? We're all ears here.
I might just note that in the United States, we are just 9 days away from a major US election that will most certainly not just chart and determine the future of the United States, but as the United States continues to embody the role of the leader of the free world, what is that going to mean depending on who gets elected? And as a former US ambassador, I will tell you, I firmly adhere to the notion that politics stops at the water's edge. Very firmly believe in that principle. But I do think that it is simply obvious that there are two very, very different approaches to international engagement and American leadership. that we're seeing. And so I just can't imagine, Paul, honestly, answering this question without noting that it will depend on who the next president of the United States is for the next 4 years. Regardless, what I would encourage either of the candidates to do is, as Al noted, we have to be able to look at a future that is brighter than even the past pre-COVID. What that will mean is more partnerships and better cooperation. What it will mean is cooperating with our friends and our allies and finding ways to partner with those who we often disagree. I think that there really is nothing like a global pandemic to wake people up into recognizing that when you have to shut down international mobility in order to deal with the spread of the virus, and you can see what an impact that makes on global economies, on regular vaccinations, children around the world, which are dramatically on the decline, when it impacts the abilities of families to be together, it's an extraordinary wake-up call to people who never might really think about the importance of our interconnectedness. And then I'd also say, and again, I think that one of our two candidates will respond to this the way that I would suggest, but frankly, global warming is a very, very real and serious problem. It is driven by man-made activity, and here in California, we're bearing the brunt of it. I'm sure you've all seen the impact of the deadly, devastating wildfires on our state. 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in the history of California have happened this year alone. 4% of our massive state of California has burned this year. So we know it's real. We are committed with our research universities and with our national laboratories to not just figuring out how are we going to do a better job at combating the wildfires and putting them out before these winds that carry them forward and bring debris forward again. Circumstances and conditions that we have not dealt with. These are relatively new conditions that make the fires so hard to fight, but also investing in carbon capture technology, renewable energy technology, better lower cost battery storage technology. All of these things are happening in a very forward-leaning way in California. Oh, excuse me. Including the governor's recent commitment that by 2035, only electric vehicles will be able to be sold as new cars in the state of California because greenhouse gas emissions are so dependent on small vehicles and the fuel needed to be refined to service them. So working together globally on the issue of climate change is something that we believe and will continue to believe regardless of the outcome of the election, and we will continue to be committed to regardless of the outcome, that this is a way that the world truly can come together. And then I just would like to just say one more very briefly. We heard from President Choi at the beginning of this, and he said one word 3 times. The word was kindness. It is a real question out there whether or not our leaders and our communities are going to be able to hold on to the concept of kindness, empower people with leadership and policies and actions that are organized around the principle of kindness, which includes generosity and compassion and understanding and all this. And I think it's important to say it because for any of us who study our history, we know that it is a decision that we make as communities and as leaders, whether or not to lead with kindness as an organizing principle or with the opposite of that, or with selfishness or with small-mindedness or with xenophobia. And my hope, I think, former President Brandel, is that as we look to the future and as we look to the people who are engaged in their communities around the world as to what this post-COVID world looks like, that we remind them the power of kindness and generosity and understanding. These are not soft principles. These are powerful principles that will truly make a difference as to whether or not we'll be able to bring up the next generation into a world that's better than the one that we leave behind. Absolutely, and those are key elements that based on which every culture and like the future should be based on. And when we turn it to Ambassador Mudallali and we look at the map that is behind me, that dates from the 1960s when my country of Lebanon was at its prime years. And since then, we've seen absence of kindness, but maybe not absence of generosity. We've seen an existence of respect, but maybe not in a peaceful way. But also, we recently kind of experienced a devastating event in Lebanon where we were taking life for granted, the way we take beautiful weather and environment in Northern California for granted, until we got the fires and so an apocalyptic sky, and until we got the Beirut port unfortunate explosion. And personally, I lost family members as well. And I can tell you, not only weather is taken for granted, but sometimes life is taken for granted. So I think we all have this moral obligation and mission to make the world a better place. So Ambassador Mudallali, what is, in your view, also, to respond to the question and what also Lion Al presented, what would bring us to a better world than what we had?
Thank you very much, and I thank my fellow panelists because they really set the stage to what I want to go to, because I'm going to talk about the political part of it, the causes of why we are here. In 1945, these people who met in California, there was leadership and there was vision, and that leadership and vision produced the organization and produced the book that we're going by, the Charter of the United Nations. This charter today, the purposes for that charter they're not respected. So when we talk about a post-pandemic, we have to look about our reality now. I mean, look at the United Nations and the Security Council, for instance. The Security Council has been blocked for a couple of years now. Since I've been there, I see that on major conflicts and major issues, it does not move because of the veto power, because of, the different powers have different interests and everything is blocked. It took them 3 months to agree on a resolution on COVID. I mean, how more do you want to know to see how we are blocked? So to change that, to have a post-pandemic, a better world, to build better, as Mr. Brandel said, you have to have a different reality now. Unfortunately, we don't know, the architecture of the 1945 world has shifted now. It's changing. And you have a new reality. You have the unipolarity is gone. There's multipolarity now. Power is fragmented, and there are new emerging powers that are challenging status quo. And that tension is reflected in the United Nations, it's reflected in the international system, and it's impacting small countries like mine, and impacting lots of small countries who are victims of becoming under pressure because of these powers, or under attack, or are used as a chess pawn in the international political game. They don't think of us as human beings with aspirations and with hopes. They think of you as national interest, and you are part of that. And that's what's happening in my country too. So I think there has to be some reform and some change of the way the Security Council works, the way superpowers are working. So there has to be a realization that we cannot go the same path we are going, because the challenges and the problems in the world now are colossal. The ambassador talked about climate change. I mean, the world is literally on fire everywhere. You talk about poverty. The rise of poverty is amazing now, especially after the pandemic. the inequality around the world, the injustice. I mean, so all these elements, these are explosive if you don't find solutions for them. And that's the challenge for the post-pandemic, that we really don't go back to business as usual. You cannot go back to business as usual. There's no way you can survive. The world will survive if we go back to business as usual. We have to have leadership and people with vision that will really set this world on a different path. You cannot go back to doing the same thing you've been doing for the last 75 years and think that we're going to have a different outcome. So this is a great opportunity when this world is on its knees now because of the pandemic. It's really a great opportunity to think about what is that will make a better future. What kind of future we want? Do we really want a future of same problems, same conflicts that are mushrooming around the world? Or a world where we're building walls among, between each other, or we want a world that will start thinking about the humanity of the other, understanding the other, understanding how it's important it is that we work together to solve our problems, because there's no, Moynihan used to say all politics is local. There is no local politics anymore in the world. Every problem that I have in any corner of the world is everybody's problem. I mean, look at the virus and the way it's spread. And this is the best example of how interconnected the world is. So to really build better, we have to change the way we have thought about the world and about future, about peace for the last 75 years. We have to start thinking differently. And this needs leadership and leadership and leadership.
This is thank you so much. And this is a great stepping stone to the last question I have for you before we switch to the dynamic Q&A session. We've been receiving a lot of questions. So we all agreed that the future is not going to look like it was immediately before the pandemic. We strive for it to look better. We need leadership. We need values like kindness, respect, openness, and so on, so forth. And we agree that there are different dimensions to the work that we need to do to make the world a better place, not only to eradicate armed conflicts, but also to tackle those issues that we started by mentioning, such as pandemics, climate change, and the like. So our last question in a few words: how would you redefine peace? Lieutenant Governor, we'll start with you.
Well, Paul, I've tried to kind of outline some of the priorities that I think are important for us in the world to focus on. Combating climate change, of course, being one of the key ones, but creating fair systems of international trade, recognizing the value of human beings around the world through our agreements on labor, and then, of course, an organizing principle, which is more philosophical in attitude and approach, one of kindness and understanding. But I'll tell you, I also, again, I'm a former United States ambassador, and I believe in American power. I do believe that the United States is the indispensable nation in the world, as Madeleine Albright often said. And so when I think of the role of the United States in bringing peace to the world, I think first and foremost, accepting that role is very important. But I also think that accepting the reality, which is that the United States cannot solve problems alone or in a vacuum. We have to work with our international partners and do it in a way that respects those partners, where we listen, really listen and hear and understand. I'm sure everyone has been following the recent outbreak of violence in Nagorno-Karabakh, with the importance of the process there to get to a ceasefire agreement. Every day, every hour that fighting continues, lives are endangered. So it's not just theoretical, Paul. It's very, very practical. And I do believe that the United Nations infrastructure that was put into place with the signing of the Charter in 1945 has given us that international framework and architecture to be able to work together internationally with every country in the world to be able to bring peace. The United Nations is more important than ever, I believe, in spite of the fact that there are challenges within the organization right now as we speak, and in the relationship between the United States and the United Nations. But I'm not one of those who believes that I am more of a reformer than a revolutionary. We did develop in the 20th century some very extraordinary ways and organizations and international infrastructure to be able to bring peace to the world, recommitting ourselves to the process and bringing reform where necessary to be able to meet the new challenges, particularly those that Ambassador Mudallali mentioned at the start of this around information and propaganda and fake news. We can do this, but it will require not just the leaders at the top, but everyone to find that place that those who came out of the Second World War found themselves, which is that the cost of destabilization, the cost of war, is simply too high. And it gives us all a moral imperative to commit ourselves to working together toward a more peaceful world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And Ambassador Mudallali.
Yes. For me, peace to happen and to take hold on this earth, you have to respect a rule-based system. You cannot have peace without international law, without people respecting certain rules and regulations about what should happen in the world. You cannot do it without respect for human rights. You can't do it without respect for justice and having justice around the world. So these are very, very important points that are there in the Charter. You know, this week, I worked with 52 women ambassadors, and we sent a letter to the President of the General Assembly, and we said, we want to recommit to the Charter. We want to sign it again. And we had a ceremony, and we signed. Yesterday, I signed, or everybody signed, and Monday, we're going to celebrate that, new signature. I really hope that people, when they put their hand in the name of their governments, they really meant what they did when they signed again, because it's very important to recommit to these principles and purpose of the United Nations, that we respect dignity of the person, we respect human rights, we respect people's values and things that they believe in. Otherwise, we're going to go from one conflict to the other, and peace will not be possible around the world. So for me, it's a rule-based system. You have to have some ground rules that people have to respect, and these have to be respected by the big guys as much as the small guys, because it's very important that the big powers set an example and they lead by example, and that will really help a lot. Try to change the dynamic and change the conversation around the world about what's permissible. The end of occupation, end of injustice around the world. These are very, very important things to achieve peace.
Sure, agreed. And it's not only about rules that come from the top, it's also rules that we self-impose on ourselves and our values and the values that we embrace. And the line,
if you allow me here, when I spoke about justice, I'm not speaking about justice only in the in an international sense. There has to be justice within countries and justice among states, because if you don't have justice and you have bad governance inside these states, you cannot have also peace. And if you don't have peace internally, you cannot be a partner for peace outside. I'm sorry.
Very, very good point. And we were starting to get a lot of, I know the Lieutenant Governor cannot, she has another engagement, but I'll try to run very quickly. Al, in a nutshell, and I know there's also, I link it to one of the Q&A questions. People are asking about the role that that LCI and other international organizations could potentially play in the role that the UN plays in maintaining peace in the world. I know this is more of a question of international law, but we know that the UN has the Blue Berets, which mission is to go and maintain peace once peace is there. But what can, for example, LCI play in such an auxiliary role like Red Cross does in supporting kind of people around the world in areas where peace has been hindered?
Well, actions speak louder than words, and we're already doing that. When we had the refugee problem going on in the Middle East, and we had all the people coming in that were left homeless because of the war that was going on. And an answer to your question before, what's the definition of peace? It's technically an absence of war, but it has to be more than that. So we deal with the problems that the violence that happens with all the refugees that came particularly into Europe, and Alliance worked very well with housing them, vocational training, clothing, food. We act as partners. So internationally, we rise to the occasion on that, but I'd like to put it a little bit more personal, if I may. And I said it before, there's no peace without international understanding. And I want our Lions Club members to know we belong to the world's largest service organization in the world and the greatest service organization in the world. But it starts at home. And when, particularly if you live in New York, but you live in San Francisco, some of the big cities, the governments of other countries have general counsel offices there. They may have missions there. And when the ambassadors, and I've had this experience working in New York, the ambassador from Iceland, who we worked with a while ago, she's now down in Washington, D.C. The ambassador from Russia went out after I met him, and he met the Lions in the Bronx and the Queens in New York. And it's a way that they get to know people that they would not necessarily get to know and understand us if they just stayed in their society, which they have a tendency of doing at the United Nations in New York and other places. The Portuguese American Lions Club in New York, they have the general counsel comes every year. I meet with her. The Japanese ambassador comes to the Japanese American Lions Club. This is something that we can do in our own communities or the United Nations Association. Let's start partnering. And never take any of your membership or anybody you're talking to for granted, because you never know where they're going to wind up. Just think of Jimmy Carter when he said to us, if it wasn't for his membership in Lions Clubs, he never would have been president of the United States. Just think of the leaders that we're producing in our organization.
Lionel, does that mean you're going to run for president someday?
Absolutely not.
I heard the quote that another person said absolutely not, because I'll have to shave twice a day.
I'm happy with what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing.
Good. God bless you. Another question that we have is also on the impact of global warming. Oh, by the way, before the Lieutenant Governor, has to escape, I want to share also the news that Governor Newsom has sent us a letter last night commending and acknowledging the role that LCI and the team has played in forming and helping form the UN and drafting its charter, and all the humanitarian work that is being done around the world. And really, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, and to you and Governor Newsom for this acknowledgement. It means a lot to us.
Well, Paul, thank you. I do have another Zoom that started a few minutes ago, but I've just been so interested in hearing the other panelists. And so I'm sorry I do have to jump off, but I did talk a little bit about climate change and California's commitment to it. The Paris Climate Accords are extremely important, not just in order to reduce emissions, but to commit to the advancement of the necessary technology to save our planet. And I think that what's also just really important for people to understand is I think some folks feel, oh, well, why try to combat something that's impossible to fix? Well, it's not. I mean, if you think about the kinds of technologies, I mean, I think if I were a little girl and somebody showed me an iPhone, went back in 1966 or 68, that I would think that it was a magical device. I wouldn't believe, well, that there's no cord. How could it work without being plugged in? You know, and a million other things about it, right? But the fact of the matter is that carbon capture is within our reach. Renewable energy technology is within our reach. And I just want to give one more statistic on this. And I want to have it exactly right here about California's emissions. But in California, we are already at 36% of the energy that we use in the 5th largest economy in the world is renewable. If we add other clean technology that is not renewable, which we refer to as that is how we refer to nuclear and to large hydro, we are at 63% of our energy is carbon free. That is enormous. We basically are double the average of the rest of the United States. We know this is possible. We know we can get there. We need to confront the fact that fossil fuel burning is extremely harmful for our planet. And there are many countries and many very large companies who have a stake in continuing to use and to see consumers rely on fossil fuels. We have to figure out how to get them with the program in order for them to be able to help us with this process of transitioning to alternative fuels. Solar and wind are proven. The cost of delivering solar and wind has come down dramatically. And again, 63% of California's energy is carbon free. I think that is really just what I would like to end with, that anybody who thinks that this is a magical fantasy vision that's not possible, come to California. We'd be happy to show you around.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Any last words, Lionel, Ambassador Mudallali, before we wrap up? You're on mute, Lionel. You are on mute. And Ambassador, go ahead. Ambassador,
thank you.
Please.
And I just wanted to comment on what you asked, Mr. Brandel, and talk about it, how important it is for education when he was talking about what you can do. I think education is something that the Lions Club can help, and everybody can help around the world, because now, because of the COVID and students are staying home, we have, especially in the Middle East, like in my country, Lebanon, for instance, a generation that's at risk of losing, a year of schooling because of the lack of internet and lack of technology and the tablets and stuff like that. If people can help with education, I think this is the best way to try to make sure that peace can be served, because you don't want these people to fall off the cracks, and you don't want these people to get out of school and never come back to school, and then they will go to do other things, and they fall into poverty, or they fall into bad things, and people say that desperate thing. People do desperate things. People become desperate if they have no education and no jobs and no money and stuff like that. So I think education is the most important thing that we invest in. And if anybody around the world can help in anything, they should help in education for people and for host communities in Lebanon and for refugees. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Lionel, and last words to the world and your fellow Lions.
Well, thank you, Paul, for doing this. And Ambassador, it's a pleasure to meet you. And hopefully when things get a little bit better, I can come in from Long Island and we can get together at some point in time and discuss things a little bit more.
Anytime, even now. You're welcome.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is, number one, I'm in Syracuse, New York right now. We're at our Lions Council meeting. All the district governors from New York are here. And as we know, we're probably a little bit frozen sometimes right now because of the virus. People are afraid of doing things or whatever. But we're in pretty good shape in New York, as the ambassador knows, with the virus spread is fairly low right now, thank goodness. But we made a decision, Paul, and the rest of the Lions that are listening right now, that We know that getting out of this virus situation is a big job. Government can't do it. Government can't do it alone. It's going to take civil society to solve a lot of the problems of the world. We are writing a letter to our governor, knowing when the vaccination comes out that it's going to be a big job, and we don't know how it's going to get done yet. We are writing a letter to the governor and asking him, letting him know that we are available when, just like the way they did the polio vaccines many years ago, that they needed people to help do that. We want to be part of the answer. We don't want to be part of the problem. We want to be the solution. So we are writing a letter to the governor of New York. And I wish the governor was still on here right now, because maybe the Lions of MD4 would like to do this. That it's going to be an unbelievably large job to vaccinate all the people in their states, in their countries, to do this. So we are offering our assistance of our Lions Club members, our 14,000 Lions Club members in New York, to help get this job done. Number one, it's going to give our Lions Club members an opportunity, something to serve. We serve, remember that. Number two, it's going to be great visibility for us, and we think it's going to help with our membership. The last thing I'd like to get out, and if anybody knows me, has followed me during the course, that we have international presidents, we have international directors, we got district governors, really great titles, but things would not be possible if it wasn't for the individual Lions Club members in our club, because without them, we can't do these things that we're doing right now. We can't restore sight to the blind. We can't train all these people. So you're going to hear a lot about the term kindness matters. And let that term not only change your life and the way you look at things as a Lions Club member, let that personally be your guideline when you're looking at your next door neighbor, when you're out shopping and somebody may pull out the car in front of you or something, you get pissed off at them, pardon my French. Thank
you, Lionel. Thank you so much. We have less than 30 seconds to wrap up, and be mindful of people's time. Really, thank you so much for joining. To you, to Ambassador Mudallali, and in hindsight, to Lieutenant Governor Kunalakis, and Dean as well, a very, very great friend of mine and leader in international affairs. Thank you so much for mastering the ceremony and your welcoming words. Thank you for the audience and the Lions around the world for being with us today. It means a lot to us.
And they are the most important people in the world. The people that are on this video here are members.
Of course, they all are. God bless you all. Have a great